we saw the college football playoff rankings get released, a lot of things stood out to us. Now, the top four remained the same, but the question was, where would Indiana drop after their loss to Ohio State? They're safely in the top 10, and then right behind them, Arizona State at number 11. As of now, the fifth highest ranked conference champion is Arizona State, but a lot of disaster is on the horizon for the Big 12, which we will talk about in just a moment. But first off, Sam, what stuck out to you in the college football playoff rankings?
I think what stood out to me, or at least surprised us, was that Clemson was at that 12 spot. Now, they got booted out because Arizona State is the projected fifth highest ranked conference champion, so they would indeed get in and kick Clemson out. But what it tells me, at least, Maddie, is that the committee thinks probably 2 ACC teams are going to get in and possibly 3.
It looks that way, and especially with Miami, their big game against Syracuse, that's going to be a shootout. A lot of points going to be scored this weekend for that one.
Yeah.
But this Clemson-South Carolina game, it is slowly now turned into just the matchup of the year, and I can't wait for it. This is going to be a really fun one.
Yeah, this has literally been one of the best college football seasons that I can ever remember. And having that expansion to 12 teams has now forced the regular season to mean that much more, which is why that Clemson versus South Carolina game is so important. But we look to the Big 12 now because there is madness going on in that conference. There's an 8-way tiebreaker that we're not even going to get into at all. But we talked with Heather Dinich.
Hard pass.
Hard pass on that for sure. But we talked with Heather Dinich on Rankings Reactions about the scenarios with the Big 12. And Sam, you listening to her, what did we learn that we have to explain to our viewers on what can happen in the Big 12?
Okay, so it is important to remember the 5 highest ranked conference champions get in the field. Nowhere in the fine print does it say they have to come from the Power 4 conferences. So right now as it stands, the 16th ranked team in the playoff rankings is Arizona State. The 17th ranked team is Tulane. And we talked about the scenario in which the Big 12 possibly misses out. It is a possibility. What would have to happen is Arizona State would have to lose this upcoming weekend, and plus some more chaos would have to ensue. And Tulane would also have to beat Memphis tomorrow, as well as win the AAC championship. But if that were to happen, it is possible that Tulane gets that 5th highest ranked conference champion spot. I mean, we all following
here? Give me a paper bag, man. I got anxiety, man.
All right.
That's a lot. But this is, I think, the line of the night last night from Heather Dinich.
Yes.
The 25th ranked team, the Colorado Buffaloes, at 8-3, can still make the playoffs.
It's amazing.
That's what's so great
we
about
thought that a 12-team playoff, it'll simplify everything. Well, no, that's not the case. It's actually made it more complicated.
All right, so we have the All-State playoff predictor right up on the big board behind us. You guys can use that online as well. So go ahead, play around with it, have some fun with your friends and your family, especially on Thanksgiving weekend. But Sam, go ahead and show us the scenarios over here as to what has to happen. And just know, in order for Colorado to get into the Big 12 championship, for those who are fans of the Buffaloes, 2 of these 3 teams have to lose.
That's it. If that were to happen, Arizona State and Iowa State lose, BYU likely in the conference championship game along with Colorado. Now, I think for the absolute, the chaos scenario to happen, you just have this happen. Then you start getting into the 8-way tie situation, right?
Yeah. Look at it, 0-0.
There's zeros across the board, which opens up the door for teams like Baylor and teams that, have really struggled this year in Colorado to get in. So, it's fascinating. I think the toughest game, Maddie, is probably the Iowa State-Kansas State game. Outside of that, you would say Arizona State and BYU should win their respective games?
I agree with that. I think the Iowa State-Kansas State game, that's going to be a really good one. I think Iowa State, to me, is probably the best overall well-rounded football team within the Big 12 conference. But that being said, they need a lot of things to go their way and obviously just handling business. But like we saw last weekend, it doesn't matter, man. Anything can happen in these situations right now, and especially in the Big 12. I don't really know if I trust any of these football teams.
Yeah, which is why that scenario of the Big 12 not having a college football playoff team is still a very small possibility. But let's go ahead and move on to the ACC. We brought up Clemson versus South Carolina earlier to how big that game is. And now we're getting into a situation, guys, where the ACC can possibly get 3 teams into the college football playoffs. How high do you think that Clemson can climb up with a win?
I don't think that they can really climb up with a win because, remember, South Carolina's ranked behind them.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're playing a team that's in the field. They need some teams to lose ahead of them. So you're looking at Notre Dame playing USC this weekend. You're looking at potentially SMU coughing it up against Cal this weekend, or even Miami losing to Syracuse. You need an upset there. But again, the committee tells us that Clemson is like the sixth man on the bench right now. You know, they're first in if somebody coughs it up.
Would they be sixth man of the year, though? Matt, do you think that they can actually make some noise if they get into the college football playoff?
Can they make some noise? I mean, of course they can. They can be matched up with any team and hang in there with them. You know, I find it amazing, though, that Clemson, they're relying on an 8-3 South Carolina team as, like, their vote of confidence. But yet we're not going to keep any 8-3 football team from the SEC actually in consideration as a really good football team for the playoffs. So, you know, I love this little this conundrum that we found ourselves in where it's like it's a big win if they win it, but, you know, it's still a team that is questionable within the conference.
Yeah, and I know you love South Carolina.
I do. And Lenora Sellers, man, he's one of the most improved players in the country. We talk about Archman, we talk about these other young DJ Lagway. Lenora Sellers, man, is performing at extremely high level at the current moment. You're right, though. Kennard, Stewart. Hey, Tonka Hemingway. Nobody talks about the D tackle for him for South Carolina. That dude a disruptor. We saw Clemson struggle against Pitt, unable to run the football except for a Cade Klubnik quarterback draw for 50 yards. You know, that's where I'm really interested to see. Can Clemson have a balanced running attack? Klubnik is playing really good football right now. I love what they do offensively, but they need to be a little bit more balanced to win against South Carolina, who is really tough in the trenches.
All right, well, let's go ahead and go over to the Big Ten now, because the only team that is guaranteed a spot in the conference championship game is Oregon. So we await the result of the Ohio State versus Michigan game. Yeah. And that game seems to mean a lot more to Ohio State than it does to Michigan, because they haven't beat them in quite some time. But if Ohio State happens to lose that game, then we wait on the result of Penn State and Indiana's game. So speaking of Indiana, kind of a sleeping team that everyone didn't expect to get to this point, but they're still in the top 10. Sam, do you see them as a top 10 team from where they are?
If you asked me that question at like 3 p.m. this past Saturday, I would say no. But if you asked that same question at midnight this past Saturday, I would say yes. And we actually heard Ward Manuel say on the show yesterday that he thought Indiana's resume now is worthy of being in the top 12, and I don't.
After one game, one game changes everything.
But I don't know that it necessarily is the one game. I think it's the games that happened around them. And
I'm just being critical.
No, but to your point, like, yes, their resume has a ton of questions. The strength of schedule, you mentioned it last night as well, jumped 50 spots, up from 106 to 50 something.
So Indiana's strength of schedule was at 106 before their game against Ohio State. They go against Ohio State, lose that game. All of a sudden, their strength of schedule is now at 51. So that goes to show you how much of a difference your strength of schedule can jump just by playing a better opponent. So when you look at who are the teams ahead of Indiana? SMU. Indiana is 51st. They have a stronger strength of schedule than SMU. They have a stronger strength of schedule than Notre Dame. They have a stronger strength of schedule than Miami. And who did those teams lose to? Miami lost to Georgia Tech, right? Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois.
You don't have to say it. We know.
All right. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, and SMU lost to BYU. So if I'm looking at Indiana, our only loss is against Ohio State.
But BYU, this is a team that might be playing in the Big 12 championship. Yep. So I feel like SMU, they definitely have a favorable loss, and that's earlier in the year in September. We're talking about a Tulane team who's lost to Kansas State. They've lost to Oklahoma. It's in September. So I feel like we can't really hold some of those things against some of these football teams that happened in early September. But you're right. I mean, it definitely is something that we cannot forget. And also just adds to the mayhem of what we're experiencing this college football season.
All right, over to the SEC, who us at ESPN clearly favor, according to all the college football
Well,
fans.
I definitely do, so don't look at me, all right? Yeah.
So 3 teams right now in the bracket. Georgia has a guaranteed spot in the SEC championship game, so we await the winner of the Texas and Texas A&M game. Woo! So as it stands right now, the winner of the SEC championship game, would you go with the field or the winner to win the national championship? Because the SEC is the best conference in football, right, Matt? Because I'm going to come to you first, Mr. Representative of the SEC.
You're damn right it's the best conference in America, all right? You know why? Because we got the best players in the country from team to team. If Georgia wins it, then yes, I will take them versus the field. If Texas or Texas A&M wins the SEC championship game, I'll take the field. Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
okay.
and I think that Texas, no doubt, I trust Sark. I like what he does offensively. The defense is absolutely talented, especially in the secondary too. But I do just kind of question the overall competition of their schedule this season if they've really been tested. And the one time that they were tested against Georgia, it was clear that they were not prepared for that moment.
And you watched some tape on Georgia, and we haven't given you an opportunity to really dive deep into it. What are some things that you saw from their game against Tennessee that you really liked, where you said, oh, Georgia's back?
The biggest thing we got to remember for all of these things going forward is coaching matters. You know that I say that all the time about this. But I know and believe that Kirby Smart, for a one-off game, can definitely stop any offense in the country for one game. And that's what the playoffs are all about. Just, hey, can you go 1-0 every weekend? I believe Kirby Smart can do that.
All right, so Sam, there's 3 lost teams in the SEC. We're looking at Bama, Ole Miss, South Carolina. Out of those 3 lost teams, which one do you have the most faith in to actually get into the college football playoff and do something with it?
None of them. I don't see, unless there's chaos ahead of them, I don't see that. There is no path right now. I'm sorry, SEC fans. There is no path at the current moment for Alabama, Ole Miss, or South Carolina to get in. South Carolina beating Clemson helps. But I think they still need some upsets to happen in front of them, because right now they're sitting out of the field. And if everything holds chalk, which basically we know isn't going to happen, so there certainly is a possibility that one of them gets in, but right now there isn't.
Man, that is so tough. I know you don't like
Out of that list, I'll put Alabama actually on the bottom of that list. And the reason why is because I just value the defensive line talent for the other 2 teams that much more. And I think in these big game scenarios, if you can, just like how we saw in the Ohio State-Indiana game, if you can get after the passer and dominate the line of scrimmage and get sacks and hits on your quarterback, you're going to win the game a lot of times in some of these big-time matchups. And that was the difference. Ohio State got after Curtis Rourke. We're hitting him consistently. You think that the Ole Miss D-line or the South Carolina D-line isn't going to have a day against some of these offensive lines that we've seen in the country? I mean, you know, good luck to you. These guys got NFL stars on their defensive line. For one-off games, I believe that they can be very disruptive.
Yeah, if there was any team out of those 3 that I would pick, it would definitely be Ole Miss. I just feel like they're built to win a championship, but for some reason, they just can't seem to win those games that matter the most. That loss to Kentucky was not good.
That's a killer, man.
Last week was even worse. So we'll see which one of these 3 lost teams can get into the college football playoff. But we know there's a big matchup this weekend, Texas and Texas A&M.